Have you ever been with someone who felt so close to you? Like you were finally safe, finally chosen, and then out of nowhere, they pulled away, shut down, and acted like they didn't care at all. No slow fade, no clear reason, just a switch. And just when you start trying to move on, they come back, watching your stories, reaching out, acting like something is still there. And you're left thinking, how can someone go from loving me to nothing and then back again? Stop. This is the part most people get wrong. They didn't lose feelings for you. They got overwhelmed by them. And what you're about to hear will either give you clarity or completely change how you see this person and this breakup. Here's what most people don't realize. This isn't random behavior. It's not them being confusing or indecisive or playing games. There's actually a very specific pattern happening underneath all of it, and it tends to follow the same stages almost every time. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the 6 stages of a fearful avoidant breakup, from the moment they start to pull away, to why they shut down emotionally, to the part no one talks about, when the feelings come back. And more importantly, you're going to understand what's actually happening inside their mind and body at each stage. So you can stop guessing, stop overanalyzing, and finally make sense of why this felt so intense and so confusing. So let's go back to the part that probably confused you the most. Because if you're like most people, the relationship didn't just suddenly end out of nowhere. There was a shift. Something changed in them. Maybe they started pulling back, getting irritated more easily, needing more space, or just feeling off, and you could feel it. You just didn't understand it yet. This is where stage 1 begins. This stage is almost invisible if you don't know what you're looking for. Because on the surface, everything can still look mostly normal. But internally, a fearful avoidant is starting to feel overwhelmed. Not because they don't care about you, but because they care. And that closeness is activating 2 competing systems at the same time. Psychology calls this an approach avoidance conflict. It means part of them is pulling toward connection, wanting closeness, intimacy, reassurance, while another part of them is pulling away, because that same closeness feels unsafe. And research on attachment shows that people with disorganized or fearful avoidant attachment often experience heightened emotional reactivity in close relationships, especially when vulnerability increases or the relationship starts to feel more serious. So what does that actually look like in real life? It doesn't come out as, hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed and scared of how much I care about you. It comes out as irritation over small things, pulling back slightly, needing more space, mixed signals, emotional inconsistency. And this is usually the stage where you start to feel it first. You might think, did I do something wrong? Why do they feel different? Why are they pulling away when things were just good? But here's the truth. Nothing necessarily went wrong. This stage isn't about losing feelings. It's about feeling too much and not knowing how to regulate it. And if that overwhelm isn't addressed, it doesn't get talked through. It doesn't get resolved. It builds. And that's what leads into the next stage. Deactivation. And if that emotional overwhelm keeps building, eventually, something shifts. This is the moment most people describe as, it was like a switch flipped. Because from the outside, it feels sudden. But psychologically, it's not. What's happening here is something called a deactivating strategy. This is a term used in attachment research to describe how avoidant individuals cope with emotional overwhelm. by creating distance from it. And that distance isn't just physical, it's emotional, it's cognitive, it's a full internal shutdown of the attachment system. Instead of feeling everything all at once, they start to suppress it. Studies on attachment and emotional regulation show that avoidant individuals tend to downregulate emotional responses, meaning they unconsciously push feelings out of awareness to reduce stress. So what does that actually look like to you? This is where they go cold, become distant or detached, stop expressing affection, communicate less, seem more logical than emotional. And here's the part that really messes with people. They start to believe their own thoughts in this state. Things like, something feels off. I don't think this is right anymore. Maybe I don't have the same feelings. But those thoughts aren't coming from clarity. They're coming from emotional shutdown. Because when you suppress emotion long enough, you don't just feel less, you perceive the relationship differently. And research actually shows that during deactivation, avoidant individuals can focus more on a partner's flaws and the negatives of the relationship as a way to justify pulling away. So to you, it feels like, how can they just turn it off like that? But to them, it feels like relief, like space, like finally being able to breathe again. And that's why this stage is so confusing, because while you're feeling the loss of connection, they're feeling the absence of pressure. But this doesn't mean the attachment is gone. It means it's been buried, and what's buried doesn't stay buried forever. Now they enter stage 3, detachment and justification. In this stage, they don't just feel different. They start to think differently too. This is the stage where the narrative changes, where the relationship that once felt meaningful, safe, and real suddenly gets filtered through a completely different lens. And this isn't random either. Psychology calls this cognitive reappraisal, a mental process where we reinterpret a situation to regulate how we feel about it. In avoidant attachment, this often becomes a way to maintain emotional distance. Because if they start feeling the connection again, that overwhelm comes back too. So instead, their mind starts building a story that supports leaving. This is where you'll hear things like, I just don't think we're right for each other. Something feels missing. I need to focus on myself. I don't think I can give you what you need. And here's the part that really hurts. It sounds calm. It sounds rational. It sounds final. But what you're hearing isn't necessarily clarity. It's justification. Because research on avoidant attachment shows that individuals often engage in what's called defensive distancing, mentally emphasizing a partner's flaws, incompatibilities, or relationship doubts to reduce emotional closeness. So they might start to focus more on your imperfections, downplay the good parts of the relationship, rewrite memories to feel less emotionally significant, convince themselves that leaving is the right decision. And from your perspective, this is usually the stage where they feel the most certain, where you're thinking, how are they so okay with this? How did they go from loving me to this? But what you're seeing is someone who has fully leaned into the logic, because feeling would be too overwhelming. And this is why trying to reason with them in this stage rarely works, because you're speaking to their emotions while they're operating from protection. And protection sounds like certainty, but underneath that certainty, the attachment hasn't disappeared. It's just been pushed further out of reach. And once the relationship is fully let go, that's when the next shift happens. And once the relationship actually ends, something happens that feels almost impossible to understand from the outside. They have now entered stage 4. They feel better, lighter, calmer, more in control. And I know how painful that is to hear, because while you're sitting there trying to process what just happened, they seem okay. Sometimes even really okay. They might be more social, more relaxed, back in their routines, acting like nothing really affected them. And you're left thinking, how are they fine when I'm falling apart? But this is where you need to understand what's actually happening psychologically. This relief isn't because the relationship didn't matter. It's because the pressure is gone. Remember in stage one, when they were feeling overwhelmed, that emotional tension, that internal push-pull between wanting closeness and fearing it. Once the relationship ends, that tension drops, and the nervous system finally settles. Research on attachment and stress regulation shows that avoidant individuals often experience reduced physiological arousal after creating distance from emotional closeness. So to them, it feels like, I can breathe again. I feel like myself again. This was the right decision. And that feeling can be very convincing. But here's the part most people don't talk about. Relief is not the same thing as resolution. They didn't process the relationship. They didn't work through the emotions. They removed the source of the overwhelm. So, of course, it feels better at first. And this is where people make a critical mistake. They see this stage and assume they never cared. They've moved on. It didn't mean anything to them. But that's not what this is. This is what happens when someone regulates by disconnecting instead of processing. And the problem with that is, what isn't processed doesn't disappear. It just goes quiet. And once enough time passes, and that sense of pressure is gone, those feelings don't stay quiet forever. And then, something starts to change. Not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, subtly, it creeps back in. Because once enough time has passed, and that sense of pressure is gone, the attachment system starts to come back online. And this is something we see in attachment research. When the perceived threat of closeness is removed, avoidant individuals can begin to re-access suppressed attachment feelings. In simple terms, when it feels safe again, they start to feel again. And this is where what I call the glitches start to happen. They might start thinking about you more, replay memories, feel random waves of missing you, wonder what you're doing, feel the urge to check in. And instead of a big, clear return, it shows up in small ways. Watching your stories, liking something out of nowhere, sending a random message, reaching out just to check in. And if you've experienced this, you know exactly how confusing it feels. Because now you're thinking, wait, they do care? Why are they coming back now? What does this mean? But here's the part you need to understand. This stage is not clarity. It's conflict. Because the same person who is starting to feel the attachment again is also the person who shut it down in the first place. So what you're seeing isn't a full return. It's emotion, breaking through the suppression. And it's inconsistent, unpredictable, sometimes warm, sometimes distant, sometimes gone again. And this is why so many people get pulled back in here, because it feels like something is coming back to life. And in a way, it is, but it's not stable yet. Because the moment those feelings start to get too strong again, that fear underneath hasn't disappeared. And that's what leads into the final stage, the one that keeps people stuck the longest. And then, something starts to change. Not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, subtly, it creeps back in. Because once enough time has passed, and that sense of pressure is gone, the attachment system starts to come back online. And this is something we see in attachment research. When the perceived threat of closeness is removed, avoidant individuals can begin to re-access suppressed attachment feelings. In simple terms, when it feels safe again, they start to feel again. And this is where what I call the glitches start to happen. They might start thinking about you more, replay memories, feel random waves of missing you, wonder what you're doing, feel the urge to check in. And instead of a big, clear return, it shows up in small ways. Watching your stories, liking something out of nowhere, sending a random message, reaching out just to check in. And if you've experienced this, you know exactly how confusing it feels. Because now you're thinking, wait, they do care? Why are they coming back now? What does this mean? But here's the part you need to understand. This stage is not clarity. It's conflict. Because the same person who is starting to feel the attachment again is also the person who shut it down in the first place. So what you're seeing isn't a full return. It's emotion, breaking through the suppression. And it's inconsistent, unpredictable, sometimes warm, sometimes distant, sometimes gone again. And this is why so many people get pulled back in here, because it feels like something is coming back to life. And in a way, it is. But it's not stable yet. Because the moment those feelings start to get too strong again, that fear underneath hasn't disappeared. And that's what leads into the final stage, the one that keeps people stuck the longest. And this brings us to the final stage, the one that keeps people stuck the longest. Because by this point, they're feeling the attachment again, but the fear underneath it that never actually got resolved. So now they're holding two completely opposing experiences at the same time. I miss them. I want them. This mattered. And at the exact same time, this doesn't feel safe. I'm going to get overwhelmed again. I can't do this. And this is what creates the cycle. This is where you start to see. They reach out, then pull back, they open up, then shut down, they move toward you, then create distance again. Psychologically, this is tied to what's known as disorganized attachment, where the same person is both a source of comfort and a source of fear. So connection doesn't feel fully safe. But disconnection doesn't feel fully right either. And that creates a loop. Connection to fear to withdrawal to repeat. And this is where a lot of people get stuck, because every time they come back, it feels like this is it. This time it's different. But unless something actually changes internally, the pattern doesn't change, because the issue was never just the relationship. It was how they experience closeness itself. And this is the part that's hard to hear. Coming back doesn't always mean they're ready. Sometimes it just means it feels safe enough to feel again. So if you've been sitting there trying to make sense of this, trying to figure out how someone could go from loving you to shutting down to coming back again, now you understand. It wasn't random. It wasn't you being too much. It was a pattern. And the most important thing you can take from this isn't just understanding them. It's understanding what this cycle does to you. Because clarity doesn't just help you make sense of the past. It helps you decide what you're willing to accept moving